Hey, I'm ZSH Plays. Welcome back to Jurassic World Northwest, where today we're starting a Jurassic area with a breeding center for Stegosaurus and a Compsognathus experience. Before we start building today, we need to head over to our science center and do some research. We need to research the dinosaur encounter so our guests can get up close and feed our baby Stegosaurus. And we need to grab the DNA for the Stegosaurus and the Compsognathus because we're building habitats for both of them today. And while that all happens, we're going to start building the Jurassic area. The entrance to this area is going to sit in a plaza, which will be the central plaza for the whole park. I'll explain more about that in a future episode when we build it, because right now we're waiting to get enough guests into the park to be able to research the monorail, which is one of the key components of that plaza. But essentially, it's going to give people access to the Jurassic area, the Cretaceous area, and back into the beginning as well. And with the area we're starting today being the Jurassic area, how else can we start it than with the classic Jurassic Park gates? We'll perfect that gate in a minute, but first let's get the area laid out. The big rectangle on the right-hand side is going to be the Stegosaurus habitat, and the smaller one hidden in those trees is going to be the Compy habitat. So as people walk down here, they're going to have the Compys on the left and the Stegosaurus on the right. And there'll effectively be no visual barriers between them and the Stegosaurus. And using the viewing dome, they'll actually be able to go inside the Compy habitat. With a few cycads and conifers, that's the gate finished. Is there anything more satisfying than the original Jurassic Park gate? Love that. Onto the habitats. I want the whole path in this area to gently slope upwards, because behind these two habitats is going to be an aviary, which is going to sit on a hill, so it looks really impressive. So we'll use the dynamic ramp tool to get the terrain a bit higher up there. And then we'll start putting this part of the path in here. This is going to be the main viewing area for the Stegosaurus. We're not going to be using a viewing gallery for this area, but by having the paths pointing towards the habitat and filling the rest in with rocks, it makes it look like they're actually looking at the habitat, which is cool. And with the paths in, we have one more piece of research to do, which is nests. We need a baby Stegosaurus in here so that our dinosaur encounter works. And we finally have enough people in the park to unlock Power 4, which means we can get rid of all of these pylons which are spoiling the look of the park. I just want a few pylons in the staff area, and then we'll be using repeater substation for the entire rest of the park. Back to the Stegosaurus habitat, it's time to start building. So I've laid out some fences here, and we're going to delete them where they meet the path at the front, because that's where our very special new type of barrier is going to go. And then we're going to lay out a fence for the guests to keep them on the path. I'm using this simple wooden fence, which I really like because it's exactly the one that you can see in the background in Jurassic Park near the Triceratops habitat, though we're going to keep this brown rather than paint it white just so it fits in nicely with all the forest. And then we're going to move on to the secret ingredient in this habitat, which is bollards. So a method that some zoos use to keep larger animals like rhinos and elephants contained is bollards. Because they are so big and because they're not exactly known for their climbing abilities, if you just have bollards down, as long as the gap between the bollards isn't wide enough for them to get through, you can keep them contained with those. We're going to design these in such a way that they would be retractable, which is something else that I've seen in zoos, so that when there's a baby Stegosaurus in here, they will all be extended, and when there's just adults, we can have some of them down so there's a larger gap between them and the view for the guests is even better. But these are low enough that they don't spoil the view for the guests at all, and it provides a really unique viewpoint into the habitat. I've added some bushes and shrubs in between the bollards and the path to make things look a bit nicer, and now we're just going to widen that path by using the same paint texture brush, get it all looking seamless, and there you go, you can see how good the view is going to be. Those fences at the back are a bit close, so I'm going to make the habitat a little larger just so they're less in your face. And we'll also raise the terrain at the back of the habitat to make the viewing even better. And finally, we can cover it all in conifers. And you can see here on the heat map that the dinosaurs cannot get through those bollards and are safely contained. Next up, we're going to work on some water for them. So we're going to use some of the big rock pieces to create a little rocky outcrop that we can then fill in with water. Just makes it a lot more interesting than just having the pool of water on its own. And these rock pieces are so good, so quick to make something that looks nice when you've got rocks as big as this to work with. And because you can scale them, I think I'm only using 2 different rocks for this whole rocky outcrop here. That's all you need. These are the same rocks again, just shrunk down a little bit. With that done, we can move on to the Stegosaurus feeding experience. What we're going to do is make a building, which is the indoor area for the Stegosaurus, a nesting area for the Stegosaurus, and the dinosaur encounter for the guests, and we're going to make it so that it's actually usable by the Stegosaurus. They're actually going to be able to get in here, which is going to be really cool. So we're going to make a big indoor area for them, and then it'll form a courtyard in the dinosaur encounter as well, so that we can actually see the guests in there. And once we've got a baby Stegosaurus, we can see the guests feeding them. It's going to be a fairly simple construction using the chuck-em pieces and then we're going to put some wood cladding on it to make it look much more attractive. So we'll cover it with these wooden beams and delete each second one so we get a nice pattern. And while we do this, I'll just address one of the most popular comments from last week's episode, which is, where was the Coelophysis in the Triassic forest? Well, we've already built a couple of small dinosaur habitats, and we're building another one later on in this episode, so I didn't want to do one last week, but I have left space in that area, so if we get any more Triassic dinosaurs in the game, they will be going straight into the Triassic forest. Back to these wood pieces, we'll copy it across, and then we're going to have one vertical beam for each 2 sets of these so that it looks attractive. Now that we've got this part of the building covered, we're going to copy this design onto all the guest-facing parts of the building, and then we'll add some windows above it. So we're going to use the chuck and window pieces, and then add in some of the glass pieces into them so they're actual windows. And then we'll make a big doorway so that the Stegosaurus can actually get in here. We'll use some more of the chuck and pieces for that. And we're going to make it look like there's a retracting door here by using the bottom of these girder pieces to create a metal lip at the bottom of the top of the archway, and then another fence piece in between, so you can kind of see the bottom of the door poking through. This means it looks like we've got a door, but the Stegosaurus can still get in here. Then we'll move over to the dinosaur encounter part of it, put one of the big fences on. I really like this one that's got the leaves on it. We'll recolor it as well so it fits in nicely with the rest of the building. And then at the back of the building, we'll create an entrance so that the guests can get in here. We'll use this chuck-em archway, a few copies of that at different sizes, get something that looks seamless. With this being the Jurassic area, I'm trying to embrace the Jurassic Park style while still keeping the Pacific Northwest kind of theme as well. And then we'll move on to the interior. So we're going to put a wall across here just to hide that bit of the dinosaur encounter that's sticking through. And a little tip for you, when you join the chuck-em pieces like this, you can see it creates a kind of gap in the wall. All you need to do is separate off the 2 grid pieces that are creating the gap and move them back a couple of pixels, and that will fix the issue. And then we can put a nest in. I experimented with a lot of different positions for this nest and the other things that we're going to have in here, because it's really important that the dinosaurs can traverse this area, because it's going to be so cool watching them coming in here to use the nest. So I start it off in this corner and get it looking the way that I want it to. Later on it'll move a little bit across the floor, but this is basically what it's going to look like. And then we're going to build some holding pens for the Stegosaurus where they would, I don't know, spend the night, or maybe in rough weather. Although I'm not sure how bothered a Stegosaurus would be by rough weather. If we go back to our heat map, you can see they can actually get in here, which is great. We'll make some wall feeders for them as well, using this planter and just some upside down foliage to look like plants that they can munch away on. We'll get a few of those in there. The scaling tool is so useful for things like this. No more not being able to use a piece because it's just a little bit too big. We can get it exact. We'll fill the bottom of each pen with the sand pieces. Looks like they've got a nice soft substrate. These sand pieces and the grass pieces are so useful. We're going to be using the grass ones in the next habitat actually. And we'll join the sand onto the concrete floor of the rest of the building just with one of the sand decals. And there we go. Got a nice little holding area there. Just needs a ceiling and a roof. So we'll move on to the ceiling. That's going to be a kind of gridded lighting array. We're just going to use one of the girder pieces, put a couple of lights on it, and then we can copy that across the whole room, and that'll give us a really kind of industrial looking lighting setup. It's just 3 pieces, but it looks really good. If we get that in the right position, we'll be ready to add the roof on. We want this to be above the windows, but below the level of where the roof is. So that's looking good. We'll place that there, and then we'll get a roof in. It'll be a simple corrugated roof in a nice green color that's going to complement the sandy tones of the chuck-em pieces, and we'll alternate the corrugated roof and glass so we can get some light in here. A few more details added, the building's done, and it's time for the Stegosaurus. We'll release them at our hatchery area on the other side of the park. This is the male. I've gone with a mixture of the classic Lost World color scheme and some much more vivid armor plating, and then just the Lost World color scheme for the female, so we got a difference between them. And then we can airlift them across and bring them into their new habitat. These are the first proper large dinosaurs in the park. Really excited to see them in their habitat. The Stegosaurus is such an iconic dinosaur. I think they're going to look amazing in here. We just need to add some plants in to make sure that they're happy. Well, fairly happy at least. A fight has broken out immediately. I think it's mainly to just establish dominance. Neither of the dinosaurs were hurt. And now they're in here, the guests will arrive, and we can see what the habitat looks like from their perspective. These bollards work really nicely. Great view into the habitat, almost like there's nothing between you and the dinosaurs. Wish we had dinosaur parks in real life. Let's take a look at the breeding center. There's the dinosaur encounter part, and here is their indoor area. And we take a look inside, we've got a nest all ready for them. Later on, we're going to initiate a breeding program, but now it's time to build the Compsognathus experience. This sits on the opposite side of the path to the Stegosaurus habitat. I'd call it in with the Compys, but I can't get the text small enough to make that look good, so it's just going to be the Compsognathus habitat for the moment. We're going to use one of our 2 glass pieces in the game to make the barriers, so the guests will get a really good view in there as they walk past it. We're going to put one of the dirt decals on the bottom of the glass to get that realistic, grungy look. And then we'll simply copy this piece around the curve of the path, and that's the majority of the barriers in. We'll use some simple chucking pieces to create the side barriers, don't want to be using glass where it's not necessary, and then we can move on to some terrain work. So what we're going to do is very slightly raise the terrain in the habitat, and then we're going to dig out a hole and place the viewing dome inside it, so it's actually lower than it would be normally. This is going to get the guests right down to eye level with the Compys and make the viewing dome a bit less of an eyesore in the habitat because it is absolutely huge. It'd be great to have some like mini versions of these, more like viewing bubbles, so you could just have like 3 of them in the habitat and hide them behind bushes and stuff rather than having one massive one. But this does a good job of making it fit in better. We can't put the terrain back in all the way around it, but this is where the grass panels that I spoke about earlier come in. We can use those to seamlessly join the terrain onto the viewing dome. We'll just place these all around the dome. I'd love the Compys to come right up to the glass of the dome, but unfortunately they can't interact with the grass pieces, so they don't get all the way up to it, but they're still certainly close enough to get a great view from the dome, and we'll see those in the cinematics in a minute. Just a few more of these grass panels to place, making sure they don't clip through the glass in the dome. With a bit of terrain painting and some of the actually 3-dimensional grass, we can really tie that in nicely. We'll delete a few of the extra pieces that we don't need, just to make it even more subtle, and then we can start planting up the habitat with ferns and bracken and things like that to help hide this away a bit. I discovered in my research that Compsognathus was actually discovered on what would have been a little tropical island, which would be a really cool theme for one of their habitats. Not really practical to build that outside in the Pacific Northwest, but maybe in a future park we can build a little desert island for the Compys. That would be really cool. We'll place in the remote viewing entrance so that the guests can actually get into the dome, finish off planting around the habitat to sit it into this forest nicely, and then we'll turn the remote viewing entrance into something more interesting. Absolutely loving this conifer forest vibe, but let's get this entrance sorted. It's kind of a weird shape because it's got those fence attachments on it, so we're going to embrace that. Use some of the wetlands wood pieces, which I really like, to create a really kind of simple, quite rustic building that's just going to be nestled into this bit of forest here, down a little path, so it feels quite secluded when you get to it. I don't want anything massive and grand, as Compys are just little dinosaurs after all. So we'll use the wood pieces, we'll put on basically the same roof that we used in the Stegosaurus habitat, get a nice simple door and a door frame in, add some further wood pieces on the sides, the top and the bottom of the building to make it more 3-dimensional and more realistic. Adding a trim to the bottom of the building is always one of the easiest ways to make it look more realistic. Hate that little grey path that sticks out the front, but we'll cover that up later. We'll add on a very simple sign. We really need more text options in this game, desperately hoping we get those in the next update. We'll use some of the flattening foundation pieces to cover up the little grey bit of path that comes out, and we'll just have a simple rocky path to join it onto the main path. I've added a couple of the viewing dome banners on there for interest and a little light to keep the entrance illuminated. We'll add an information sign on for realism. We'll add some small nests in so we can get more Compys. And then finally, we'll just use some more chucking pieces to cover up the bottom of the glass in the viewing dome and join it nicely onto those grass panels so it all looks natural. And that's the habitat done. Let's go and get our Compys. I think our wetlands park is the only park I've ever built without Compys in it. They're so cool. Here they are, hopping out of the hatchery. They're so cute. And this is what the finished viewing entrance looks like. And here they are in the habitat. They're so tiny, but they've got such personality, and if we go into the viewing dome and take a look at them from there, you can see that the guests get a really good view of them from in here, and I think it's worked out nicely. We've got one more thing to do before the end today, and that is set up a breeding program for our Stegosaurus. These dinosaurs are very young, and we've only got 3 of them, so it might take a while before we get any babies, so we'll set up a breeding program to try and speed that along, get our scientist onto that, and pretty soon we've got dinosaurs moving around the nest, which is always a good sign. We've got the male and one of the females walking around the building. And with the dynamic lighting in Jurassic World Evolution 3, It looks so amazing. It's so good to finally be able to build interiors with proper lighting. And now the male is actually going to go in and inspect the nest. I think this is the first proper interior that we've built for dinosaurs on this channel. Great to see them in there, but will they have a baby? Well, that is what we're going to find out next week, along with building our first habitat for a proper big carnivore. Thank you so much for watching as always. Thank you especially to those of you who've joined the Explorers Club. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next week.